All right, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Hey Coach Radio. This is episode number 112, and I got the amazing Coach Zach Ritchie in the house, and we're going to be bringing you guys a Q&A episode where we've received your questions from social media or via our email. Maybe you're clients of ours, maybe you're people on the internet that are reaching out and asking questions, and we're going to answer those questions for you on today's podcast episode. I'd like to remind you that if you happen to have any questions for us, you can go ahead and you can email us or DM us or reach out to us on social media, and we'll make sure that we get those answers to you through this platform, either on YouTube or on the podcast. If you're an avid listener of the show, please help us out and share our podcast with your friends and followers, and we'll be sure to share it on our social media platforms as well. Each week, we will be providing you information, experience in the nutritional coaching world to help you apply the knowledge and gain the tools you need to change your life for the better, essentially making you an educated dieter. Coach Zach, man, we've had a very interesting last week.
Yep.
How are you doing? How's everybody doing that you know? How did everybody, weather themselves through the storm?
Yeah, luckily I'm just fine. So we had, I know Will here is referring to the hurricane we had in the area that was pretty devastating. Even without getting a direct hit, it was probably the worst flooding we've had in this area. So I looked out. There was plenty of places that flooded on both sides of me, but we're all right. And I know you, as well as myself, have plenty of friends and family members who didn't make out quite as lucky and are dealing with really losing everything. So.
Yeah, if you're watching this on YouTube, so we just had Hurricane Helene came through, kind of wiped out the western coastline of Florida. A lot of people, Sarasota, Fort Myers, Tampa Bay, Crystal River, all the way up to the Panhandle were negatively impacted by this hurricane. And to my knowledge, there has never been a storm like this or a storm surge like this in over 100 years.
Yeah.
So nobody's lifespan, nobody could have predicted this, but there were a lot of, experts in the field of weather, and they were saying, hey, this is going to be the worst thing you've ever experienced if you're in the Tampa Bay area.
Yep.
And it was.
Oh, yeah.
Really wish a lot more people would have listened and gotten themselves out and evacuated. But unfortunately you have a lot of old heads that they were born and raised in these neighborhoods. They're in their 60s, 70s, and the waters never even came close to what we experienced. I would argue to say that it was astronomical to even think about the macro view of how much land was underwater, both on the beach side, on the Tampa Bay side, Tampa, all of that stuff. And, unfortunately, a lot of people are in a position right now where they are repairing their lives. Houses 4 or 5 feet underwater, and now they have to start that recovery process of bandaging things back up and getting their lives back in order, going through that entire process. And obviously, like you said, we know a lot of people that were negatively impacted by this storm. So if you guys just help us out, keep these people in your thoughts and prayers. If you're listening to this on the podcast, you're going to be listening to this, months after Hurricane Helene.
Yep.
And so with that being said, but all of you on YouTube that are watching this is, it's not live, but this was recorded a couple days ago. If you're a believer, just help those people out, pray for them, pray for them to have, hope, healing, and restoration in their hearts, and to believe that things are going to get okay.
Oh, yeah.
All right. So with that being said, anything else, man? What's going on with you in your life? Obviously, you're still training, still keeping up with stuff.
Yep.
Everybody in your family's safe and healthy and all that.
We've just been volunteering, trying to help some of these people out.
Yeah, that's incredible.
So that's what we spent all weekend doing. Aside from that, just staying within the monotony of bodybuilding.
Yeah. And coaching, you have some clients that are getting ready to step on stage, yeah?
Yeah, I got a couple clients this coming weekend, and then a few following that. So,
Sweet.
Getting to that time of year. So excited for the potential of some wins this weekend.
Absolutely. That's awesome. So a lot of what we're actually going to be talking to you guys today about has to do with bodybuilding in some capacity, right? We're talking about prepping for photo shoots, peak week strategies, getting lab work done and potentially having higher than normal liver enzymes, what can cause that. And then we're also talking about women that are kind of prematurely putting themselves into a position where it looks like they have perimenopause on their blood work. So let's go ahead and let's dive into this first question. So, hey coach, I'm prepping for a photo shoot. I was told by people in my gym that I should dehydrate, cut water, cut sodium, load potassium, drink alcohol, and cut my carbs out, right? Or one of them or all of them. Yeah. You know, this is very, very common. One of my clients actually asked me, he's like, hey, this guy, he's done multiple shows and he trains at my gym. He told me I needed to drink a bunch of wine the night before to dry out. And I want to talk about that because I don't think as a natural bodybuilder, it's not the best thing for you to do to dry your muscles out. You will end up looking very flat.
100%.
Your vascularity likely will not be there. Now, granted, when you drink wine, obviously, does it vasodilate momentarily? I think it can.
Yep.
But it's not going to help you look your best within the following days to be able to show your best physique, either in a photo shoot or on stage. So the number one question, should you dehydrate yourself? Let's start there.
Especially with natural bodybuilding, I wouldn't say so. I guess if you've went through kind of a mock prep or something like that with your coach, or if this isn't your first time doing something like that, then maybe your body might respond better than some to it. But I'd say in general, I would say no.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I mean, I still do it. I dabble in it a little bit now, but when I was primarily a natural bodybuilding coach, I can tell you right now that we've had 55 to 57 people turn professional under our guidance.
Yep.
And I never dehydrated any of them. Not intentionally. I can never tapered water down, or the standard protocol that you're going to hear is, hey, you go 2 gallons Saturday, 2 gallons Sunday, and then 1.5, 1.25, 1.75, 0.5, and then you just sip for like 48 hours. The problem with that is that if you end up doing that and you are natural, the thing you want to consider is a simple fact that aldosterone begins to secrete typically after about 18 hours of not drinking enough water. Now, aldosterone will actually make you hold and retain water, which is also why a lot of natural physique athletes will say, if they dehydrate, they will say that, oh man, like the day, like 3 days before, I was able to get a crazy pump in the gym and I looked awesome, but then the day of the show or the photo shoot, I couldn't get a pump. Right? And that's because your muscles are dehydrated. So you have to think about how much fluid is actually in the muscle, how much of the muscle is made of water, and then put 2 and 2 together.
100%.
Right? Like water, sodium, carbohydrate. You want to look full, you need all 3 of those things. You choose to decide to eliminate one of those things or all of those things, you will look dramatically flatter. And I've had a lot of experience with this, both on myself, because I always experimented on myself with pretty much everything that I ever decided to implement with a client. I'd experiment with it first, and I'm like, okay, this makes me look super flat. This makes me look pumped. Okay, now what can I do to optimize or strategize around how we can make our athletes look the best on stage? And so question number one, should you dehydrate yourself? A simple answer to that would be no. I would even venture to say that the most important thing is you need to be stage lean before you even decide to try to peak anything. If you're not stage lean, you're kind of just shooting yourself in the foot. You know, you're expecting a magical outcome, but it's not going to happen because you didn't actually do the work to get lean enough to even show the work.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Question 2, should you cut water, sodium, or load potassium? Have you ever heard people loading potassium and dropping? Okay, so we both know that that's very dangerous. Can you talk a little bit about that and why it's so dangerous?
Yeah, I mean, you're messing with your sodium potassium pump. And a lot of times, I know we've heard plenty of horror stories of people messing with their cardiac rhythm and experiencing, heart palpitations or even worse just by supplementing with potassium without knowing exactly what they're doing. So it can be dangerous, especially when your health is already compromised. We know that bodybuilding isn't exactly the healthiest thing. We're taking our body to extremes And then now at this point, we're also going to be messing with our cardiac function. So
Yeah, I like what you said there. I mean, bodybuilding in and of itself is not the healthiest thing. And it doesn't matter if you're natty or not,
Nope.
to be honest with you. I mean, if you are natty, you just have to realize, like, what are the metabolic adaptations? What are the hormonal adaptations that happen during this time when I'm pushing myself beyond the brink of what I should be?
Yep.
And then you need to know logically, okay, well, how do I actually recover from that afterwards?
Yeah.
Because what I'm noticing is that there's a lot of natural athletes that have the capability of being very good, right? But then even 6 months, 8 months after the show's over, their internal health, if you get blood work, is still not back to optimal.
Exactly.
So there's a lot of intricacies there, and that could turn into a full hour-long podcast here. What we do want to dive into next is, like, how should you properly load carbohydrates going into a photo shoot? Because that's another misconception. The gentleman that I was referring to, he had actually said that the guy in his gym had told him, hey, you know, you need to cut your carbs down to like 0 for like, you know, a week, and then load a bunch or go out and just binge the night before the show. I'm going to say that's not the most ideal way to do it either. Now, I do think that there are some coaches that specialize in what's referred to as carb backloading, right? So you basically would deplete for 4 or 5, 6 or 7 days, hit a new low, you're stringy as ever, super flat. And then you'd actually start to re-implement a very high amount of carbohydrate that would be predicated on how much lean body mass you have and the rate of your metabolism the night before the show. I think that there are some coaches that can do a really good job with this, but the likelihood of them, but there are a lot of coaches that do not know how to do it and do it in a manner where it's consistent. And so what I highly recommend is actually carb front loading. So you're actually doing more of like similar alignment to something like a carbohydrate cycle, where you're loading carbohydrate maybe Saturday and Sunday to fill them out. And then you'll notice that over the course of the next 24, 48, 72 hours, they're still full, but now those little detail lines start to come in. So now they actually look full, but they're also tight, right? And that's kind of the ideal scenario. Now, in the first day, you're going to look more carb inflated, so like carb full, because there's a lot of glucose in transition. And sometimes that can last 24 to 48 hours. But then on the other side of that, you know, you would have a place where you are getting to a place where, you okay?
Yeah, I just got a cough.
Oh, okay. So you are getting to a place where you look full, you look lean, you look tight. It's a great look. It's a dynamic look, and that's kind of the way that you would want to present yourself on stage. So therefore, theoretically, if you know how long it takes for you to quote unquote hit your peak, then you can strategize your peak week around that exactly. Okay, so as an example, if you know you do a high carb day and then 3 days after the high carb day you look your best, well, why break that? Why adjust that? Why mess that up, right? You already know that if you take 3 days after your high carb day you look your best, then you would essentially like to try to program your peak week to look something very similar. So maybe it's a high carb day Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday are low days, you look your best, then you carb up again, and then maybe it's like Thursday, Friday, Saturday, you look your best, and then that's the look that you're putting out there on the stage. Now, there are other things that you would take into consideration, such as being very consistent with your sodium intake, right? And then also being consistent with your water intake. And I don't really believe in manipulating either one of those.
That's the thing. The less you manipulate, most likely the better. And that's especially if you're actually in shape. And so there's less room for error if you know, okay, I already look good. Why manipulate all these things? And as far as like the carb loading and things like that, it's not really a guessing game for us, just because from an individual level, we've been using refeed days and playing around with that throughout the entire approach, so that we know when they look their best. And so maybe there's someone who looks their best the day after that refeed day, or maybe even 2 days after that refeed day. And then at some point we'll try maybe 2 refeed days back to back. And so by the point in time in which the show day is there, we know how they how they're going to look.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's dive into this a little bit because this isn't something that I've historically talked about really at all. But that's kind of the difference between natural athletes and enhanced athletes, right? And I guess what would be the main differences? Because I know with enhanced athletes, there's obviously much higher androgens, and some of these androgens can make people hold water. Is there any specific strategies that a NPC athlete or an enhanced athlete would highly need to consider, probably a month, 2 weeks, or 2 to 4 weeks out from the show, to make sure that they're not showing up super puffy, like more bloated looking?
There's definitely more tools, but there's also a lot of more room for error when it comes to all the things you can manipulate. But you do have to keep in mind that fullness isn't something that is something you have to worry about as much with a natural athlete, just because they're using things that are keeping them full throughout the entire approach. Usually,
You
of a
mean an
dieting
enhanced
phase.
athlete?
Of
You
an
don't have to
enhanced
worry
phase.
about fullness
Yeah,
as much.
because usually they've been using things such as, let's say, GH and things like that, which is going to help you maintain that fullness, especially even on low caloric intake.
Okay.
And then specific androgens as well. Typically about 2 weeks out or something like that, usually pulling back on injectable compounds, just so that you don't have to worry about any sort of lumps or site, from site injections or anything like that, which obviously take away from your stage presence.
For sure.
But there are still oral compounds in there helping them maintain their fullness even on low calories. So maintaining your fullness, also looking drier and harder. And then typically at that point, once again, same thing with natural athletes. If you're in shape, there's a lot less things you have to worry about. So then you may not have to play around with things such as diuretics. And so usually, and also typically on your first show or anything like that, also not something you want to mess with unless if you've experienced it before, because it can completely throw off your entire look. Then you can get to the point to where you're you're stringy, and so you come on stage flat and stringy because you've been using things such as diazide and things like that. So
Yeah, so there's definitely a lot more to consider when you're an enhanced athlete, and obviously a lot more, probably I would argue a lot more margin for error.
Yep.
You know what I mean? And I have seen all the stuff that you're talking about. People that have these big lumps on their glutes, and like people that show up looking very puffy, like they just don't have the detail. They don't have the lines and the aesthetics, whereas other people on stage will have those details, those lines, those aesthetics. Everything looks full, but it also looks almost granite-like,
100%.
very tight, lean, vascular. Then you'll see other guys on stage that don't have the vascularity at all, and you're like, what's going on? This is super interesting. So a lot more margin for error, a lot more things to be able to manipulate if you are an enhanced athlete. Let's go ahead and let's get moving on to the next question. So, hey coach, I got my labs done and my liver enzymes were between 60 and 70. What can I do to lower these? Now, can we just highlight real quick, I guess the liver enzymes that you'd be looking at, it's ALT and AST, right? In an ideal scenario, you'd probably have your units per liter probably be 20 to 30, right? Maybe even lower than that, 15 to 25, somewhere in that range. But if we're talking about a 60 to 70, what are some things that could actually cause your liver enzymes to be high?
Number of things. And so any sort of, really even supplements. And so not just oral compounds in regards to enhanced athletes. Obviously that's going to raise liver enzymes, but some natural supplements, specifically ones that have to do with optimizing hormones and things like that. It all has to be metabolized through the liver.
Yeah, we were talking about like higher doses of DHEA kind of off air, and I've actually seen that happen before. And I think DHEA, in all honesty, it's becoming a supplement that it's being too overly used in too high amounts.
Oh, 100%.
When I'm implementing DHEA into, maybe it's a client and maybe she's like perimenopausal, or she has perimenopausal looking blood labs, and testosterone and estrogen are both tanked, I'm usually starting off with something very low, because I don't want to start off with something higher. What I think high is like, 25 milligrams, 50 milligrams, something like that, because I've seen the side effects that come along with that.
Oh, yeah.
And so with that being said, I usually start them off 5 or 10 milligrams, you know,
Yep.
something super light. And then from that point, if we have to add more in, we can, but you basically would want to do like a before and after review of blood labs to see, is the 5 working?
Yep.
So if the 5 is working, why do you got to go to 10? If the 10 is
Exactly.
working, why you got to go more than that?
And also, don't just guess and think
Yeah.
you need DHEA. And so I've had plenty of male clients come to us that have been, it's an easy, accessible hormone that is over the counter. And so they'll use it thinking it's going to help increase their natural testosterone, which it does have the ability to do so, but I've seen it to where it's just increasing their estrogen like crazy. I mean, it's a precursor for your sex hormones. And so they could be doing themselves a huge disservice.
Yeah, one of the things I think is super interesting about DHEA is that I believe, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it has more to do with like where it goes is predicated on your genetics.
Yeah.
Right. So if you happen to be more of an estrogen converting male, you're going to get you may get a surge of testosterone, but there's also going to come along more estrogen that's converting. So therefore,
Especially
you have
if they're
to worry
carrying
about
more
blocking
body fat.
it.
Yeah.
Right. So therefore, you have to worry about blocking it. Now, I've also seen some guys where testosterone just shoots up and the estrogen stays normal. I've also seen the same thing in women. So some of them just convert it to estrogen, some of them convert it to androgens. And you have to know, you can't just blindly recommend this stuff because it can completely alter your hormonal profile, specifically for testosterone and estrogen. But circling back, some other things that can cause liver enzymes to be higher, like non-prescription pain meds, you're talking like, Tylenols, Advils,
All those,
Aleve, all
yes.
that kind of stuff. And then certain prescription medications as well, including things like statins and other drugs that help to regulate cholesterol, blood pressure, and all those things. Drinking alcohol, it was kind of funny because when I started to do bloods for the first time and I started to evaluate a lot of labs, it was actually around New Year's.
Yep.
And I'm noticing, like, why are so many of my clients having high liver enzymes? Because they were all drinking, you know? It's Christmas, New Year's, they're all drinking all the time, they're all drunk. And I'm like, okay, your liver enzymes are super high. Have you been, like, drinking or anything? They're like, oh, yeah, coach, the night before my labs, like, totally went out and had, like, 4 or 5 drinks. I'm like, okay, it makes sense. So if you have high liver enzymes, we'd recommend supplementing with something probably just like a milk thistle, but then also identify what's actually causing the liver enzymes to be high.
Yep.
And then you can decide, do you want to stay on that thing or do you want to remove it?
Tutka is also a favorite of mine. Cool. I've seen that be extremely beneficial.
Yeah.
It's just a biosalt. But yeah, milk thistle is number one. That's usually the easiest to go to. And then, obviously optimizing lifestyle factors. So maybe staying away from the booze for a little bit or cutting back on any oral supplementation and taking it easy on pain medication, etc.
So we've tapped into this just a little bit here in this episode, but question number 4 is, women that are, let's just say 35 or into 45, 50 years old, with bottomed out hormones. Now we're talking about bottomed out specifically testosterone, estrogen, and progesterone.
Yep.
So on lab work, it looks like they're in perimenopause, everything's shut down. But these are women in their 30s, right? So what I wanted to discuss was what could actually cause this to happen. Like, how would a woman that's supposedly healthy be in her early 30s or mid 30s and have no testosterone, no estrogen, no progesterone? One of the things that I actually see is something called post-birth control syndrome, which essentially is, a lot of the women will get on birth control in their teens before they've actually had the ability for their menstruation cycle to mature or before they've even had a cycle, right? And when you get on these prescription medications that essentially shut down androgens and progesterone and probably not even producing estrogen yet, you can't expect for your hormonal profile coming off of birth control to be amazing. In most cases, it's terrible. So then you have to be able to identify, okay, what do I need to do in order to get these hormones to surge and kind of, get back to a level where they should be. I think the standard process is we need to, number one, stop them from dieting. Right? Because the dieting in and of itself can lower testosterone, it can lower progesterone. Now, if you're just looking at blood work and you're a chronic dieter, it could look like you're in perimenopause, but you're not. You're just low-calorie dieted and overstressed out.
100%.
Right? So post-birth control syndrome is one of the first things I see. The premenopause, this is another topic of conversation that I think is important because, again, most women diet. We know that. They diet way more than men, and so therefore they have low testosterone, typically low progesterone. I don't see the low estrogen too often.
No.
Sometimes I see it, but just like the other day I saw a panel with a woman, she's 37, and she had less than 5 estrogen. And granted, it was during the surge too. It was right day 20 of the luteal phase.
Okay.
And progesterone was a 0.2 and testosterone was less than 3.
Wow.
Crazy, right?
Yeah.
But 37 years old, like, why is this happening? And then you look at her history in the last 3 to 5 years, which I think is the most important thing to ask as a coach.
Chronic
Look at the
dieting.
dieting. Oh, yeah. As extreme as possible.
Yeah.
But she also had just recently came off birth control. So she was on it for 20 years.
Yeah.
She came off at 35. 2 years later, she's still everything flatlined because there wasn't an approach to say, hey, can we implement some things from a lifestyle perspective, sleep quality, resistance training, eating enough calories, over-the-counter supplementation? Are there things, bioidentical hormone replacement, are there things that we can do to actually get you back to a healthy place?
Yeah, and I mean, if she's been on it that long too, that's going to take a little bit more time to recover. Yeah. I mean, I've been working with a couple clients recently, the exact same thing, just came to us trying to get their natural menstrual cycle back after being on birth control for a significant period of time. Mm-hmm. One of them was very young, healthy individual. It only took a matter of 3 months. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, another one came to us and a little bit older, been on birth control for, 10, 15 years or so. Mm-hmm. And that definitely took more time. And so that was more of, 13, 15 months or so. Mm-hmm. And now completely normal menstrual cycle.
Yeah, so one of the biggest tips that I can give people, and if you happen to decide to come off birth control, for the women out there that are watching this or listening to this, you got to stop the dieting.
Yep.
Like, you cannot expect your body to just find all this extra energy to put into your cycle, to put into your health, to recover your hormones if you're not eating enough energy for that to happen. Mm-hmm. So you need more energy availability. And all of the scientific literature that we have available to us for the female-specific population that are dealing with either hypothalamic amenorrhea or, rock bottom hormones is a simple fact that they just don't have enough energy availability to pulse those hormones that need to come back. So if you're coming off birth control, stop dieting. Like, increase your calories, get them back close to maintenance, keep them there for like 3 months.
Yep.
That way you can at least allow your natural hormones to begin to come back. The other thing that I'll mention is you have to rest.
Oh, yeah.
You gotta rest them. You gotta, hey, if you're training 6 days a week, sorry, I know you're addicted to the gym, but we gotta scale that back. And I'm probably talking scaling that back by like 50%.
Yep.
You also, in many cases, I'm not taking any like sets to failure. I'm not doing that kind of thing. I'm actually trying to get them more away from the cardiovascular stuff and get them more into just walking and chilling.
Definitely. And we can still see body composition improve during that period of time. So it's not like they're going to regress from a body composition standpoint.
A lot of the time it's because you're dropping the stress factor of it all. You know what I mean? And you're finally giving their body what it needs for their metabolism, especially if they're young. I've seen this, which is really, really cool. If they're young, you start to feed them more calories, you'll notice that, oh man, like, she's starting to build muscle, she's getting leaner, she's looking the way she's supposed to look. And it's all because you finally started feeding the body, and the body can actually upregulate its metabolic capabilities. And then you see a little bit of that, like, I don't want to say, I guess you're kind of pushing the dynamic of calories in, calories out, but they're burning so much more energy that now they're kind of in a slight calorie restriction, and they're getting leaner while they're also improving their hormonal health.
Exactly. Yeah, but that's usually what scares people from making that decision. To come to us for that is usually because they're scared that, they're going to not let me continue to lose weight. And so, hey, we can still improve body composition.
I think it's the not losing weight like right now. At least it's not the initial goal, you know. If you're coming to us and like your testosterone is super low, estrogen's in the dump, or maybe estrogen's fine and progesterone's in the dump, and you could be in your 30s, 40s, 50s, it really doesn't matter to me. It's predicated on how you feel. And typically in the beginning, I just want you feeling good again. Because like, there's no calorie restriction diet that's going to miraculously make you feel better. It's going to make you feel worse. You know what I mean? Like low energy availability, you're tired all the time, you're fatigued, you can't sleep. Calorie restriction and calorie deficits aren't going to make you feel better. They're created, and the idea behind thermodynamics and calorie restriction is to help you oxidize and lose body fat. But it's not going to help you feel better. Now that we specialize in that too, but that comes later on once we get you feeling good, balance out your hormones, get you to build some muscle. The last and final stage of that is dieting smart.
And the body responds so much better.
Oh yeah, 100%, 100%. Awesome. Well, that's episode 112.
Awesome.
If you're watching this on YouTube, thank you for tuning in. If you're listening to this on the podcast, thanks for tuning in. Again, you can feel free, share our podcast with your audience. If you found a lot of value in it, go ahead, help us out and give us a 5-star rating on iTunes or whatever platform you are tuning into this podcast on. We appreciate you guys. God bless you. Have a great day. We'll see you in the next episode.